I'd like to call the public hearing of City Council for Monday, July 19th, 2021 to order and open the public hearing. And I'll ask the corporate officer if you can please read aloud the notice of the public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw 2104, bylaw number 4507, 2021.
Thank you. Good morning. This public hearing is being held to hear from anyone that may be affected by the proposed amendment to the city zoning bylaw. Bylaw number 4507 proposes to rezone the property located at 940 89th Avenue from RS1 Residential Single Detached Zone to RS2 Residential Single Detached and Duplex Zone. The petition and the letter are included on today's public hearing agenda. They represent 4 properties that are opposed to the rezoning. Concerns include potential congestion on the street, a belief that it would affect the worth of their home, that it would set a precedent on future development in the area, and that there is not a need for RS2 land plots in this current housing market. The staff report from today's meeting is also attached to the agenda for council's information and reference.
Thank you, Brenda. And so, as indicated, we have an email item 3.1 from Ray and Janet Piper residents indicating their concerns about the zoning amendment and their opposition to it. As well as 3.2, we have a letter from Colton Chapman with the map and petition signed by 4 residents indicating their concerns and their opposition to the zoning for the items identified by the corporate officer. So at this time, I'd like to call for a first time for any comments on this zoning amendment bylaw for council. If anyone in the gallery would like to offer some comments. And if we can just, if you can just take a chair there, please, and if you can just identify yourself just for the
Yes, my name's Christina Riglietti, and I am the homeowner, as well as my husband, of this property in question. And I just want to say thank you for considering our talk today. And I wanted to bring in a few documents to bring to your attention. So I have with me the original blueprint of our property that was submitted to the city in early 2018. And in this blueprint, it is clear of our intention to have a basement suite. So I have enlarged a few pages just to bring to your attention here. So this is the blueprint. These are the enlarged pages. And in this blueprint, it has a breakdown of the square footage. It says main floor, upper floor, basement, and then basement suite. So these blueprints were submitted to the city. They were approved, and then we constructed our home. So we carefully checked with the city to make sure that a basement suite was permitted on an RS1 zone lot, and we were told that that was okay. So we carefully constructed our home. This is a custom home with the intention of putting in a basement suite. We did not hide anything. We had it included in our blueprints that were approved by the city. And even on the secondary page here that I have enlarged, you can see a sort of a layout of the plan for the basement suite. So the basement is broken into 2 different areas. A part that belongs to the main dwelling and a separate area that is portioned off, and that's what's highlighted here, for a basement suite. You can see a separate private entrance right over on this side that is done in concrete. We have windows for the 2 bedrooms that you can see are planned out here, and they all meet clearance and regulations for a legal suite. So we've done our due diligence to make sure that this was approved and that this was illegal when we originally built our house in 2018. And so we find it a little unfair that we find ourselves in a situation where now it is not approved and that we have to go through the process of requesting a zone change from an RS1 to an RS2 when these original plans were submitted and approved by the city. So I ask you to carefully consider what I presented to you today. And I believe that this is not precedent setting. This is just making a wrong right. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
And would you like to see these documents?
Yeah, if you can just leave them with our
Perfect.
staff, we'll have them available for council.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll call for a second time for anyone that has comments or questions for council. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
If you can just identify yourself for the minutes, please, Colt.
My name's Colton Chapman. I'm a resident on our 89th Ave. Sorry, my public speaking's got a little poor with COVID. I've been on Teams for a long time, so looking people eyeball to eyeball might
We're okay with
hyperventilate
it.
a little bit. Maybe not do as well as Christina. Kind of just here to represent a few of the members of our street on 89th and just communicate our thoughts regarding this zone change. Nothing specific to this dwelling. It's more or less just the residents of this area chose to live in this community due to it being RS1. There is currently 4 empty lots on our street that are RS1. I did print another map, which would be readily easy to see. As per the zoning amendment change from the city, it was identified that this is already an RS1, RS2 community. Yet we believe like our entire street is currently RS1. We chose to live there due to that zoning. The biggest thing is the price that we paid for our lots and what was brought forth by the developers was an RS1 community, single-family homes. And that's why I'm here today, just to represent our street. And if you guys have any further questions regarding the letter or small petition that was brought forth by just me watering my lawn and people coming to speak with me, that were communicated to, as it was only communicated within 30 meters of the subject address.
Thank you, Colton. Questions, council? Thank you, Colton. Thank you. And we did get the map and the petition as well as part of our package. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for a third time, are there any other comments or questions from delegations? Thank you. And so our next item is the zoning amendment bylaw. We'll open the, read aloud the public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw 2103, bylaw 4506, 2021.
Thank you. This public hearing is being held to hear from anyone that may be affected by the proposed amendment to the city's zoning bylaw. Bylaw number 4506 proposes amendments to definitions for daycare to distinguish smaller daycares for 8 or less that are typically operated from a home from the commercial daycares located in non-residential zones, and for emergency shelter and social service center to permit temporary overnight accommodation. It also proposes an allowance for residents to use a metal storage container to temporarily store their belongings for up to 45 days during a move. And there were no comments received in opposition to this.
Thank you, Brenda. And so I'd like to call for any questions or comments for a first time. And for a second time, any comments or questions? And for a third time, any comments or questions? Thank you. So with that, we'll close the public hearing. For the delegation, Christina, we will deal with the item later on in the agenda. Thank you. Thank you for coming in this morning. Thank you for bringing the baby. It's nice to have that happen after COVID. So at this time, then, I'd like to open and call our regular meeting of City Council to order for Monday, July 19th. Our first item on the agenda this morning is our delegations, 2.1. We have Amy Wong, the Director of Regional Development for BC Housing, and Meliki Tohil are attending via Zoom and are doing a presentation to Council on BC Housing funding programs. So that I'll turn it over to our staff to get our delegations in. It's very cool to have people back in our council chambers. Okay, we'll proceed and get BC Housing on. So item 2.2, we have the delegation from the Southeast Building Learning Together Society, and Johanna and I see Heidi, Miss Patty, and Charmaine. So we'll ask the delegation to come forward and welcome and thank you for joining us this morning, Johanna. And,
morning. All right, make
There
sure
you
this
are.
is on. Does this make, oh, I just got to push the button. I got it. All right, good morning, everybody.
morning.
I am Johanna Martins, and I am with this lovely group of ladies here. Oh, somebody else is telling me. And we are all part of the Building Learning Together Society, which is a group of people from our community that have an interest in the early years. This group has been together for, oh gosh, a number of years. And prior to that, we also met with the Success by Six and Children's First group. So these ladies and myself have been involved in the early years for quite a number of years working with this. So we wanted to come and meet with you folks because we're quite concerned about some of the future of us moving forward with childcare in our community. From the news, I'm sure you've heard that there's been lots of talk over the years about $10 a day childcare and providing, you know, affordable and quality childcare for our communities. So when our government, our recent government, got into power here, they made that a promise in their campaign that they were going to move forward with that. And so they have been. They've been announcing lots of new programs that are out there for new childcare spaces. Even on the federal level, they've been making lots of announcements again on moving towards this $10 a day childcare. So it's really exciting that, you know, these concerns that we've been talking about for a number of years are finally being realized throughout the province and even on a federal level. But the one thing that we are lacking is some of the partnership with our municipality. The province thought that it was very important for the municipalities to help to implement a plan in the childcare realm. Just as you folks put together transportation plans and infrastructure plans, they wanted to make sure that childcare was important and it was put together through the municipalities. And by no means does this mean that the municipalities are responsible for the delivery of childcare, but just to put together a plan. So the government has gone out and put out tons of funding. In 2018, 2017-18, the BC province partnered with UBCM in supporting this initiative. And throughout this, they wanted to provide funding to municipalities to start creating this childcare action plan. There was huge federal provincial grants through UBCM that were provided to municipalities to do this type of work. Unfortunately, our city did not take advantage of this funding when it was available. Again, in 2019 and 2020, an additional $4.8 million was provided to UBCM again to help municipalities put this plan into place. And this is a plan that, again, looks at all of the childcare needs across the entire community, what the gaps are, what we need, and helps for the rest of us to be able to look and be able to provide those services. So again, we did not take advantage of this new childcare spaces funding that was available in 2019 and 2020. We've also been faced with roadblocks throughout our childcare. There's been issues that we've had with zoning. There's been zoning that's come up where it's been blocking future childcare that has been provided, or there's been zoning that has not really necessarily made sense to us. For instance, we're responsible for the Kiwanis Childcare Center, and kitty corner to us is the housing development, which the housing development itself is probably a wonderful initiative, just the wrong place for it to be. We've now had a huge increase in crime and activity all around our daycare, so not maybe the best. We also have felt that this has not been a priority for City Council, that this has not been something that the city has ever been interested in looking at. But I tell you, every one of us here that is in this room were a child at one point in our life, and the way that the care that we received impact our lives for the rest of our lives. And so this is super important to all of us. It's part of the foundation of what you talk about when you build the pillars of your community. Childcare is that foundation that everything is built on. We're looking for some more planning and some more foresight from the city in this to be our leaders. Our families are suffering in Dawson Creek because of the lack of this childcare action plan. Because of this, there is funding that's being missed. Opportunities are being missed all over the place. And we really, really need you folks, as our municipality, as our leaders of our community, to help to lead this. So why is this important? Why is this important to everybody? Because we're losing opportunities for funding. Now that the province has moved forward with the Child Care Action Plan and providing opportunities for municipalities to access funding, they now expect municipalities to have this Child Care Action Plan, which now translates down to me. So for instance, when I go to apply for different grants and different funding opportunities, one of the little ticky boxes that I have to submit says, does your community have a Child Care Action Plan? And I have to be able to submit that along with my grant application. Because our community doesn't have that, I'm missing out on opportunities of $1.5 million of new childcare spaces funding that I could be accessing if we had put this together. We've talked about the need. There's lots and lots of need out there in the community. We also want to grow. We need to grow in our community. The wait lists are long. There's lots of these ladies here that are, you know, on the other end of the phone calls when parents are looking for childcare. And it's a really, really scary thing for being a parent to not know where you're going to put your child in order to go to work. I've been through it myself, and it's been traumatizing when you have to pull your child out because you've had to leave them in an unsafe space and have to leave work. That's not a choice families should have to make in our community, and that's something we want to change. So where's Dawson Creek in our action plan? We need to work on this. We really feel that, you know, this is something that's super important. That's why we're all here today. And we're all pretty optimistic people here too. So this is not here to just say we've done a bad job, but to also say that there's lots of opportunity for us to go forward. So we want the city to be a great ally in our Child Care Action Plan. We want the leadership from the city to make a commitment that the Child Care Action Plan will be something that we can do. We want to be able to access different grants. We know that UBCM funding may or may not come back around. There's been some talk that we've heard that possibly in the fall there might be some more funding available. But until then, there may be other pockets of funding that we can access in order to put this plan together. Now, what this would look like from our standpoint is we have a coalition of early years people that are willing to work alongside with the city in putting together this plan. But the plan cannot come from us. The plan has to be from the city. So we will work alongside you folks in putting together this plan. There are grants, like I said, that the city can access to help put funding together, whether that be to, you know, task a staff member to work with us, or whether it even go as far as hiring an external consultant to come in. There are our committee, again, that we're willing to work with everybody and are willing to come together on this. So we think that if we've now brought this to your attention, we feel that, you know, we can be a great ally and that we can all work together in this. We really want to and are ready to develop a plan. Through our BLT Society, we have managed to access some funding that we're willing to put forward to get the start and the bare bones of this plan started. But again, it comes with the commitment from the city that this is an important task to take on. So that is what I have to say, and thank you for listening, everybody. I tried to make it as happy as I could with my little people in there.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Johanna, and all the attendants in the gallery. Just through to, because I do recall the child care, I don't know if it's a specific initiative Johanna is referring to, but I recall that in 2018, and I believe there was a significant, and I may be confused, and I apologize if I am thinking of something else. I'm trying to find it in our agendas as we speak. But I think there was a significant cost associated with that, participating in the program, and I may be mistaken on that. So I'll have to follow that up and get back to you, but I do know, I might be aware of what you're referring to, but some of those opportunities, I believe, did involve significant outlay on the city's end. So that may be an explanation as to why it was forewent, but it could be a different matter I'm speaking to. So, but I will follow up and look into what exactly happened there, because we aren't in the habit of turning down opportunities like that willy-nilly. So it could be there could be more to it than that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. A couple things, so going back to maybe even earlier than 2017, 2018, so now I'm dating myself. The city did look at daycare, and I think at that time we had the before and after school care, I want to say Tremblay and Canelta. There was empty spaces, so we were funding facilities that were not being utilized. So at that time was when that funding was coming out, and I'm going to say that that probably had some bearing on it because we had empty seats. However, the world has changed. Parents are no longer at home with their kids because of COVID, and so we're seeing this influx of need. So I just want to make it clear that it's not that the city hasn't been watching daycare or been looking at it. We have, but the needs are changing. So yes, it's probably time to look at it again, but I just want to make that clear that the city has done its due diligence since I've been sitting in this chair regarding daycare. So I just want to make sure that's clear from the other side of the perspective. The other thing you had mentioned, which caused me a bit of a riff, is the BC housing. So crime is not increasing because BC Housing has put affordable housing downtown. It has increased because of the changes in the world, the increase in mental health issues, the increase in homelessness. So on a daily basis, I work with people that live in that housing, and I will remind you that behind KPAC, there has been a shelter long before KPAC was where it's at now. And those people were not causing vandalism or disturbance. So I just want to put that out there because that does upset me.
Yeah.
Those people are looking for a change in their life and a better journey, and thank God they're not homeless anymore.
And we support the project. We do think it's good.
It was just your comment, and
I
I'm a
apologize.
frontwards person, so I'm letting you know that that disturbed me. And I hope that not to see that in a presentation again where daycares and KPAC's involved because it's false.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Javetkov.
Yeah, that same comment alarmed me. You know, we just approved that here in the last year, and it came to fruition, and there's a new facility there, and it's being housed, or it's being filled now. And your comment that there's a huge increase in crime due to that new housing, I just wondered if you have evidence there, or if you've documented what's going on around KPAC, or what prompted the comment.
And we have absolutely documented that. There's times that our daycare kids cannot go outside because there are people lingering in between our building and the daycare space.
Could you provide a report for
Yeah,
us?
absolutely.
So that we can refer it
Yeah.
to the RCMP and follow it up?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Thank you, Joanna. And obviously I've been working on this for almost a little over a year now with respect to trying to develop a childcare plan for the city and have reached out to a number of the folks in the community who are providing daycare along with the college and the school district and different folks and working with Ministry of Children, et cetera. And obviously it's an important topic for us in the community, and we certainly appreciate and recognize that. For me, the difficulty has been the lack of funding to be able to put the business plan together, and so we've been working away at it on our own without having the ability to access the funding. And it's tough to put it all together when you don't have that ability to access the funding, and we don't have it. And so we're working with the province and the school district and Northern Health to be able to try to develop that for our community, because it is very important. And we know School District 59 now have partnered with YMCA to develop some preschool after school. And so we do take it seriously. We are taking it seriously, and we are working away at it. So we will bring it back under Mayor's business in our agenda. So thank you for coming this morning, and thank you to those who came with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, do you need me to turn that?
Do we have our BC Housing delegation?
Morning.
We have you. So good morning, Amy and Malachy. Welcome. I understand you're have joined us now, and we appreciate you joining us this morning. And we have your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for your time today. My apologies for the technical difficulties. I will share my screen. I think I'm able to. Can you see my screen? Okay. You can see the presentation.
We can see the presentation. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So basically today, I understand from working with the city staff that the housing need has been completed, and we'd like to present to council what the different funding opportunities are so that we could see if we can work together to align you with your housing needs and the funding programs that BC Housing currently has. Today's agenda, it's just the role of BC Housing, how we work in partnerships, partnering with CMHC, Building BC, which is the current funding program we're working within, what's happening in Dawson Creek, and any questions that you have to wrap up the presentation. The role of BC Housing is to facilitate the creation of new rental housing across the spectrum and across British Columbia with various communities. We work with partners like yourself to create developments that are financially and environmentally sustainable. We work with communities and nonprofit groups to understand what the community and regional priorities are. Project partners, we welcome any equity contributions to the project. And again, we work with you to have transparent and accountable operations. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yep. Perfectly.
Okay. So this is just a flow chart of you know, when we work with our partners, how do we develop the custom solutions? So we identify a site together. Usually the city or the nonprofit will come forward with, you know, a suitable site. We work together to talk about what partnerships could take place for the development of this site. If there's any rezoning, or sometimes even not, you know, what is that community consultation? What does that mean for your community and the neighborhood around the site? And we'll work with your team to do that as well. We have a communications department which would work closely with the city if there was a rezoning application, and then of course go through any municipal approval process. Through all of that, we'll work with the nonprofit to go through the different milestones internally to hit to get what we call XCOM approval. XCOM is the board we go to seek funding approvals. So, and you know, concurrently as we go through this flow chart up on the screen here, we also will work with the nonprofit and the city through achieving those milestones to eventually get formal funding approved to start construction. What is our partnership model? We work in all different models. There's always a community champion. We work with a nonprofit sector to operate the housing. So always look to who that community champion is, be it a nonprofit or a First Nation community. We've had some where First Nations have created nonprofits and developed housing off nation. So we've seen that model as well. We'll work with the local government like yourself to see where can we partner with, you know, zoning, planning, equity, and I'll go into another slide of what that could look like. We also work closely with CMHC, federal government, to see what programs they have. Currently, they have the co-investment fund. So some groups are coming in and applying for both provincial funding and also applying equity through any grants they get from the federal government's programs. So with the provincial government, we'll facilitate and coordinate finance and rental assistance. And we also work with health authorities in some communities where they see that that joint effort of providing housing and health services could sometimes marry well, and we'll work with the health authorities as well. What are the different opportunities we can explore with you for the city to partner? Land equity, we've seen that with the supportive housing. Fee waivers, if there's any municipal fees that the city can explore waiving, that would also help the capital budget. And then tax abatements, that's for the operating side. Sometimes if there's some opportunity for the nonprofit to apply for that, that also helps on the operating budget, because these programs that we're working within, not only do they provide capital funding, but they also provide operating subsidies as well. So if there's some savings there, that helps on the operating side. Sometimes we find, depending on the location of the site, municipalities partnering with, bringing the municipal service connections close by. Sometimes it's right on the property line, which is great, and sometimes it might be further out. And what are those opportunities to bring those service lines right to the property line? Expedited processing. So if there's any rezoning and or DP and BP applications, how do we work together? If the city can expedite that process, it allows us to get in the ground faster. And as we know, in the north, we have a shorter window of construction. So that always helps when we work together to see how can we align the approval process to be expedited. Development and operational expertise. Cities are you know your city well, and we look to you to share what are some of those things that we could do from your local intel and how we can develop faster. Local contractors, your business association. I think we've done that with Dawson. So we lean to you to provide any of that to help with the development. I always find that local intel is always best. What does partnering with CMHC look like? So CMHC has a co-investment fund. They have a plan. The federal government has a plan of $13.2 billion over 10 years. And they do that through low-cost repayable or forgivable loans, and that's a grant that they would provide. So in working with CMHC, we have a signed MOU with them to develop 1,500 units under the co-investment fund, and this is through this is for two of the programs we're currently delivering under, which is the Supportive Housing Fund and the Women Transitional Housing Fund. Through that MOU, CMHC will contribute a forgivable loan of $50,000 per unit. So any projects that we have listed under with them through that MOU, there'll be a $50K per door grant that they'll apply. And then, as well, as I noted earlier, some societies are also coming in under the Community Housing Fund with also CMHC funding to help with lowering the capital budget, and then the ask to BC housing gets reduced. So right now I'm going to go through 4 of the programs we're working under currently. So as part of the 2018 provincial announcement, there was a 10-year program, $7 billion across 4 programs. This is the first one, it's the Community Housing Fund. That's to create 14,000 mixed income rental homes for middle and low income families and seniors. It's really a program for families and seniors capable of living independently. So there's no on-site support. It's really for families and seniors and individuals really looking for affordable housing and have the ability to live independently. It does have a rental structure frame of what we call 30, 50, 20. So the rents, we look to 30% of the units to be rented at to the moderate income households, and 50% rent geared to income. So those are basically individuals don't pay more than 30% of their income for rent, and then the remaining 20% for deep core subsidy. So that could be like a senior that's on old age pension. So really this model, one, it creates a continuum of moderate to lower income, and then it's like a cross subsidy rental framework. So really this program's looking for nonprofit firms and for-profit firms who are interested in developing and operating new rental units. Currently, the update since 2018, we've had 2 proposal calls on this. There's another slide I'll show you more about that. So we had our first call in 2018, and we had a recent one close in 2020, which was just announced in June last month. And currently there's about 5,200 homes that are either completed, under construction, or in development. Of that, in the north, we have 57 units under Community Housing Fund, and of the total province of 2,774. So the Community Housing Fund, there was the first, I'll call it CHF1, Community Housing Fund Tranche 1, that was done in 2018. So those communities and projects were allocated, and we're working through those now, either through the pre-construction phase, or they're in construction or have been completed. Then we did another round of RFP that was issued in May 2020. So I'll call that round 2. And round 2 had a 2 intake period. We were looking for some that were shovel ready, so meaning ready to be, get a building permit in basically 3 months and have a shovel in the ground. So that was an intake that closed September 2020, and then the balance closed January 2021. And we didn't have very much in the north for that September intake. I mean, in the north, we wouldn't be putting a shovel in the ground in December anyway. So we had very little. However, we did allocate 1 out of the 4 proposals that came forward. And then in January, we had way more of an intake and interest, and across the province, we had a significant number of proposals, and we had that close on January 15th. And we went through the evaluations, and in June 2021, last month, the minister had announced the projects that were approved. And for the north, we had 11 proposals that were allocated. And once projects are allocated, we then go through that whole feasibility and assessment, and like the earlier slide, where we go through internally to work with the nonprofits in the cities to get through final projects, what we call final project approval, which is really when the funding is formally approved. So when this is announced, it's an allocation, and then we work through achieving the different milestones to get the funding to be finally approved, and then that allows construction to start. Of the recent one, of the total Community Housing Fund, we had 11 recently, plus the 1 in the January intake, for a total of 345 units. Of that, there was 6 projects with First Nations, and 183 units out of the 345 are with either First Nations on and off nation. The second funding stream we're working within is the Indigenous Housing Fund, and that's to build 1750 new homes for Indigenous families and seniors. So this one, we listen to the Indigenous, be it communities and or urban Indigenous providers, to let us know what that housing need is, be it it's for families, seniors, individuals, persons with disabilities, youth aging out of care. We listen to what that need is. And we've been working, we already had the first round close already, and we're working through those. And again, it's we've done a number of projects with the first round of allocations with First Nation communities directly, which is on nation, and some working off nation as well. I've had some where they created the societies and developed housing in urban centers. And we also work with urban nonprofits, and we're working through those now, and some have gone active as well. Third funding stream is the Women Transitional Housing Program. So that's to deliver 1,500 homes to support women and children at risk of violence. You know, there are four models within the transition, women's transitional housing. There's the safe home, transition house, second stage, and permanent housing. So we're working with a number of communities to deliver that model. This funding program not only comes with capital, but it also comes with operating dollars. It's usually more of the earlier stages of the continuum, like the safe home, then transition house, and second stage, where there is more support dollars. And then typically as you go into permanent housing, the support dollars, it's very little to none, depending on you know, what those needs are in the community. Supportive Housing Fund, this is the fourth and last stream under the Building BC program. This is to deliver 2,500 new homes, and this comes with 24/7 support services for people who are homeless or experiencing homelessness. So this is a project that we did with your community recently, and you know, we work with a nonprofit who provides property management and the support services. So the last two programs, the Women and Children and Supportive Housing, are the two programs that have capital and operating dollars. The Indigenous Housing Fund has a little bit of operating dollars, but not to the scale of this. The Indigenous Housing Fund is more for if you needed like a tenant support worker. So very little, but these two programs are heavier on the support service side, and there's operating dollars to support that. This is the current project that we've worked with the community, with your community. This is the Nejan Now Supportive Housing, which was 32 units that were delivered and went operational in May of 2021. My understanding is currently the building is occupied, it's function and in operations, and that the seasonal work is currently taking place, I think, with landscaping and fencing and stuff like that. So I have to say, Your Worship, that your team has been fabulous, along with Mayor and Council, in getting this fast track. So I wanted to thank you and your team for working with us so closely to get this up and running.
Thank you.
Updates for the other programs. So, you know, these are the total: 705 homes under IHF, which is Indigenous Housing Fund, 408 units under the Women and Children, and 1951 under the Supportive Housing Program. Regional breakdown in the north, these are the number of homes that we have under each program: IHF 179, 251, and 153. So this is either in development or in process or completed. So this is my contact information. I'm the Director for Regional Development for the North, and my colleague Malachy Tohill, he's a Regional Director for Operations. He works out of the Prince George office. And this is my contact information if you ever need to get a hold of me. And that concludes the presentation. And any questions?
Amy, thank you so much. Council? Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Amy, for your time here today. So obviously, supportive housing is a very important issue. One thing I always worry about in talking with people in our community is the diffusion of, I guess, information as these facilities or units are managed by various different nonprofits to various different purposes. Sometimes it leads to some confusion in people who would benefit from your programming about what exactly is available. and how to access it. And obviously people who come from marginalized backgrounds or are in need of support might have a difficult time navigating the bureaucracy to access it. So that's something I always worry about. Is there does BC Housing provide a one-stop shop for somebody who might be seeking support to see if there is availability? And just for my own, and similarly, this next question is kind of driven by the challenges in finding all the information. What is the existing stock of BC Housing units in Dawson Creek specifically? And I don't expect you to have this off the top of your head, obviously, but if you could forward it to staff or have someone forward it to staff when you get a chance, what is the existing availability specifically in Dawson Creek, and what, if any, is the vacancy? Because I do see sometimes facilities being, vacancies being advertised in the paper, which suggests to me that there is a need that isn't being capitalized on.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Earl. Excellent questions. Yeah, so I can definitely get that information for you through our operations folks to get that data, and we'll forward that on. But yeah, what is that one-stop shop? We have a whole department called Applicant Services, and it's a department that helps any applicant who wants to apply for BC Housing, and there's a whole department that walks them through it, goes through any stuff that they need. There could be different languages if needed. So there's a whole department that an applicant can call to get that enrolled. The other thing is I also find, in addition to that, if they work with local nonprofits, you know, who would be operating the housing, to get on their wait list as well. I find it puts that applicant on the radar, you know, in the central database for BC Housing, and as well as the local one. So with this information that we forward on, Councillor Earl, I can get also that, you know, what's that phone number, what's the email, and, you know, what's the best way for applicants to reach that number.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Amy and Malachy. We appreciate you guys obviously presenting this morning. We've, as you've indicated, we have completed the Housing Needs Assessment Report, which is that first step for us in moving forward. Obviously, the Nigana House, that project has been, I think, you know, really filling a need in our community, and we appreciate the support we've had from BC Housing in getting that done. So we will reach back out around. We've got, I think, seniors housing is a big topic, I think, for a whole bunch of communities, and ours included, and we now need to begin to put that structure in place and engage with you guys and the other agencies to ensure we begin to move that forward in a real meaningful way and tangible way. So thank you this morning for giving us this update, and we can assure you we will be in touch.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And council members, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next agenda item this morning, 2.3, we have Jeff Ginter in attendance, and Jeff's the manager of the Dawson Creek Curling Club and has a request to do a presentation to council this morning. Good morning, Jeff. Welcome. It's nice to have you here this morning.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, everyone. Oddly enough, like you heard from Colton this morning, I'm weirdly nervous sitting here, not just in front of council, but publicly speaking again for the first time, and feels like decades. And I don't know, there's been a lot of changes. It's been a couple of years since I've been here. There's been a few changes in here. There's some cubicles. There's a whole bunch of cameras that just add to the nerves. So bear with me if I stumble now and again through this presentation.
We'll be patient and gentle with you this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So what I hope to give you today, you've got in front of you all with the agenda package an application, or at least a letter that references an application we intend to make within the next day or two. The deadline is the 23rd of July. I'm leaving on holidays with my beautiful wife here in a couple of days, and this needs to be done before I leave. So It's real important that we get you folks to address that letter of support today. So I'm here to answer questions about that letter. But before I get to that point, I'd like to just provide council some highlights of our last annual report, and maybe key on a few things that I think might be of interest to council, or mostly of interest to council. So obviously, you guys have known me as the face of the curling club since about 2015. I'm happy to say I've signed on for another couple of years, so you're not rid of me just yet. But I'm really looking forward to the curling club's ability to engage not just the curling community, but the community at large by enhancing our services as a community center at that facility. So I think that's the crux of what we're looking at with the grant application today. But with respect to the overall operations of the curling club, just a few highlights. So obviously the most notable impact of the last year has been COVID, and I'm not here to complain about how things have gone. I know it's impacted the community at large, and everybody that develops business in the community has been impacted by COVID. I'm happy to say that we're one of the only handful of clubs, I think there was only 5 in the province of BC that stayed open all winter. We're one of them. We lost about 4 weeks in December because of the public health orders that impacted our business, and the fact that they were a little unclear and weren't quite sure which direction they were going to steer the ship provincially. And when we got that direction, we restarted in January in a singles format. So we weren't able to play fours curling like normal or doubles curling like normal, but we played a singles format. And oddly encouraging was the fact that the feedback was tremendous. About half of our membership carried on to play singles, and almost all of those people at some point during the spring spoke to me about how valuable that was for them to get out of the house and continue to curl. So I'm really thankful that we were able to at least continue to play. We started the year with just slightly more adult teams than we had in the year previous, which was a real positive step. And we had about 320 curlers per week curling before we had the closure in December. And then after Christmas, that number dwindled to about half, I would say, of our membership, roughly speaking. Where we found the impact mostly on our membership was with the youth, and in particular the elementary programs. We were limited to 50, a capacity of 50 in that program, so we lost about half of our elementary curlers last year because of COVID specifically. So we hope to build that up again with this year. Things look positive so far. And the other thing that impacted us in a major way was the events and gatherings orders, and our inability to run any kind of a community function, banquet, party, anything like that at the curling club because of the orders. So obviously the income related to that was almost nil. So financially, just to give council a perspective, not including contributions from government, subsidies, or grants that we were able to access, we lost $90,000 roughly on operations last year. So that's a big hit. That's not something I've experienced in the 6 years I've ran the club. But COVID definitely had a financial impact on us last year, and I just wanted to bring that to council, that we were $90,000 less than normal, if you want to call it, on operations last year. And normal, we're in the break-even range or maybe a little better, and that was hurtful. But I'm also happy to say that we were very successful in accessing grant funding, subsidies, and things from different levels of government across the way, to the tune of almost $150,000. And we could have never predicted that when we started and did our budgeting. With COVID and anticipation of what we might look at, we thought we might lose 30 grand on the year net. And I'm pleased to say that we were in the black on the year because of our ability to access grants. So even though we suffered operationally, overall, I think we're okay financially. The other thing I want to mention to council, I'm very proud of the fact that we had an exceptional COVID-19 safety plan, that we had 0 COVID transmissions occur in our facility, even though we were able to stay open all year. We had one case that came to our attention that was in the facility. We invoked the contact tracing protocols and dealt with that matter properly, and we had 0 transmissions in the space. So real proud of that, and obviously that's important for us to consider moving forward. We chose to put our capital investments last year on hold, much like City Council did with a lot of the capital improvements that were destined for the curling club. I'm encouraged to see that Council has left the money in the pot, so to speak, for capital improvements this year, and I'm hopeful that we'll see a bit of that work on the city's behalf over the next couple of 3 months when we have the window to get that work done. In our case, we're fortunate that we have a stable capital asset reserve account. So even though we put improvements on hold last year because of COVID, we didn't spend the money elsewhere. and we actually grew that account slightly because we were able to maintain a bit of a profit circumstance last year. So how we spend that money is obviously dependent a bit on your decisions today with respect to our grant, and the decisions I'll make in concert with staff about moving forward with improvements at the facility. A couple of things I wanted to just mention in brief. This year, the numbers I'm giving you now are only until March 31st of last year, which is our fiscal year end, the year previous to that. I'm encouraged to say that we've already accessed about $30,000 in federal COVID funding this year already, and I expect to see a little bit more of that continue until that stream runs out, which right now I'm expecting to be in around September. I think they're watering down all the programs over the next couple of months to get to nothing by September, so we're back on our own, so to speak. Real positive reference and something that maybe demonstrates the commitment from our volunteers and members. We had to do some refunding this year when people paid in advance at the start of the season and then chose to not continue in the singles format. I mentioned earlier that about half of the people continued to play, while the other half were offered refunds. And I'm happy to say that over $6,100 was actually donated back to the club from members directly on that refund. So that's a very positive impression, I think, that we've maintained with the members, and they've rewarded us in that way by carrying on. With respect to the city relationships, I think it goes without saying that our community programming would be limited without the partnerships that we have at the city. I appreciate that, I mentioned already that I'm hopeful capital works get done this year from the city, from city staff and from the city works. I'm also aware that council's approved a long-term lease renewal back in 2017, if you recall, for those of you that were on council at the time. That's very positive, and that's something that speaks very positively when we apply for grants. It's a piece of work that's very valuable to us in the grants. We've been approached, and we're working together in the initial stages with Tourism Dawson Creek. I know council's high on the sport tourism initiatives in town, and we've engaged Tourism Dawson Creek on a proposal to host a dual provincial championship in the soon future. We haven't picked a date just yet because of COVID. We're kind of a little bit on the fence in terms of commitment to a date, and we hope to follow that up the year after with the National Curling Championship. We're working with Sport Tourism, and we're making initial approaches to Curling Canada with respect to a national championship as well. So there's some really positive things on the horizon for council, I think, from a sport tourism perspective. I will say that we have a very unique relationship when it comes to our provincial sport governing bodies. The few clubs in the northeast corner of BC, through some of the lobbying that we were part of, have now kind of have a unique opportunity to be part of both Curling Alberta and Curl BC. So we don't have to pick and choose anymore where we're going to be. We're members of both, and we actually pay the lesser fee of the two. So that's a very unique circumstance for us. It's lent us to some real good dialogue about having joint provincial championships, for example, at the same time, which is a real unique perspective for us, I think. But more importantly, it gives us some credibility on both sides of the border and recognizes our geographical challenges, yet provides us plenty of opportunity to work together with those groups. I'm pleased to say many of you have read some stuff that was in the paper. I was honored to be selected as the Administrator of the Year from Curl BC, and I think I don't say that to brag. I say that to demonstrate the commitment that our board has made and the engagement that our board has. It was their nomination that rewarded me with that selection. So I think that's important to recognize that the board is thoughtful enough and aware enough and engaged enough to encourage that type of a circumstance. I will say as well that the Dawson Creek Curling Club has been nominated as the Curling Club of the Year for Curling Alberta. I don't know the results of that nomination yet, but just to be nominated, I think, is a feather in our cap and conducive again to the level of engagement we have with our board and volunteers. Now, I want to talk real briefly about the community center aspect of what we do. So you guys have a letter in front of you. I'm hopeful that everybody's had a chance to look at it, obviously. And in there's reference to some improvements we want to make. A number of those improvements are necessary because the facilities we have are somewhat outdated in those circumstances. They're broken or damaged. And in particular, one of the items, the annex that we propose, is a project that's already been in front of council back in about 2017. And the engineering has already been approved for the annex by council and staff. The project itself was actually initiated by staff back in 2017. And basically, when we did the pad replacement in the summer of 2017, that part of the project was nixed because the bid on the pad came in a little higher than we'd hoped. So that project, the engineering on that project, part of it, and all that kind of thing is done. This particular grant application, the focus is on the community center aspect of what we do. So you'll see from the language that I put in the letter that the purpose of this grant isn't specific to recreation or curling in specifically. It's more about revitalizing downtown core and community center multi-purpose, multifaceted operations and facilities to try and reinvigorate local economies and re-engage people after COVID. So we're very high on that initiative, and I think that ties in very, very well with what we hope to do for our facility moving forward. I think there's an opportunity there to increase the use of our facility, increase the variety of events and special events and type of functions that occur in our facility, and we're very keen on trying to encourage that, as well as keep the cost to a bare minimum for council. One thing that we've done, one of the attachments I included with the reference to council in the agenda was a statement of intent in community support. It's a 2-page document that we use often in grant funding, and I keep amending that report to update numbers and purpose on an annual basis. And you can see in that report that we've committed, earned, or facilitated $1.25 million since 2015 that's been used specifically for infrastructure repair and replacement and capital improvements at the Curling Center. So some of that's grants, like the $500,000 grant that's eerily familiar to this one, interestingly enough, 4 years ago, just before a federal election. You know, we're hopeful that we can get some serious money out of this grant application as well and be able to continue to increase our use and functionality of the Curling Center and the community center that's involved there. Our goal basically is to promote community identity and spirit and do things that lead to healthy and vibrant communities, and I think that coincides well with what council's purpose for sport and recreation is, as well as the community use of those spaces. So when I talk about community use in the community center, that's basically our rentals, our dry floor use, our engagement with different aspects of the community for purposes other than curling. So I consider those functions, and we record that as functions income separate from our curling income. And it's probably worth noting more than anything that our functions income, our last normal year was in 2018-19, which by the way is our only truly full normal year since I started in 2015, where we haven't been impacted by construction projects or pandemics or some kind of breakdown that cost us some time. So I use that reference a lot to the 2018-19 season, and I think that bodes well for us planning into the future, and we can, use strategic numbers from those that year to really guide us in terms of the future planning and strategic planning. So we've not only invested or earned, if you want to call it that, $1.25 million that we've reinvested, but we've also spent $280,000 of our own money, specifically on doing investments in the facility, carpet replacements, kitchen redos, things like that, that we did on our own. And we've left another healthy pot of money in that capital asset reserve account, which is enough to cover 25% share should we get this grant application successful and should they cover 75%. So it's a big piece of the pie. We've had other contributions from groups like the South Peace Oilmen's Association, $20,000 in that case. Most recently, a couple of years ago, that we used to leverage circumstances like this, where we'll use the $20,000 as part of the community contribution, and then it helps us to leverage additional funding for grant applications like this. So that's a lot of information. I know I'm restricted on some time here, so I'm trying to give you just the highlights. If there's any questions, I'm very, very happy to answer them. The one thing I will say about the Community Revitalization Fund application, that's quite the catchphrase, CCRF, I'd rather refer it to. This is the same Western Economic Diversification Canada group that funded the $500,000 that we put forward with the pad replacement project back in 2017. So we've got a proven track record with this group, and we've got the ability to manage this project completely. Quotes will be finalized by the time I do the applications. At this point today, I'm in the $310,000 or $20,000 range, and I expect quotes in the next day or two to accumulate to a total of about $550,000. And I think when I wrote the letter to council a week ago, I'd said something like 350 to 600 or something in that range. I think I can give council, some commitment now that that number is going to be in the 550 range ballpark. So I think I'm just waiting for the last couple of quotes here so we can move forward with that. The chance of our success in this grant application go up if we don't ask for more than $500,000 from the fund, which gives us the opportunity to do projects that are $666,000 and change at the 75% per capita rate. So I think we're within that realm. I think the realization is I think we can be optimistic about our chance for success, and I think all of this should tie in well with council's plans for community development and infrastructure. And I think at this point, I'm not asking council for any money, which is a real positive thing for your deliberations today. And I appreciate that some of this work is capital planning and would fall under the realm of our capital planning agreements with council. And I'm committed to further those discussions with CO Lekstrom and Community Services Division and others that are in that role. So if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to respond
Thank you, Jeff.
where I can.
We hardly noticed your nervousness.
Yeah, I talk pretty quick though.
Councillor Parslow.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. I'm glad curling's alive and well in the community. That's good. You answered some of the questions I had written out based upon this letter. So the 25% that needs to come to support this is intact through the club's funds, right?
Yeah, so we have to commit. Part of the grant application is a section that demands, I guess, for lack of a better word, that we demonstrate that we have the funds in hand to be able to pull the project off. They're not going to approve the money if they don't know for sure that we can do it. So I'm making the commitment that the club's going to make up the difference in that 25%.
Right.
And we'll leverage where we can other funding opportunities. I also am aware that this project is destined for 2022, the summer of 2022. It actually has to be completed before March 31st, 2023 to qualify. So I want to do it in our off season next year. And that gives me a bit of time to leverage some other funding opportunities like NDIT. So I have full intent to do that. I just haven't got to that yet because this has been so recent.
So another question relates to the B, which reads I'm reading the part here, under lease from the Corporation of the City of Dawson Creek. Is the lease that we have expired, or is there a new one? Where's that staying? That's the question to staff, I guess. Sorry, Jeff.
So the current lease expired in 2017. And I think we're nearing our final stages of completion with the renewal. Back in 2017, I asked council to commit to a long-term lease, which they did at the time. If you recall, the 10-year term was the council's commitment at the time, which was important when it came to us accessing some grant funding like this to demonstrate a long-term. So we're still in the final stages, I'll call it, of that lease conversation, but we've been operating under the old lease.
So can we say that there is a lease in place then, if it's expired in 2017?
I think through your worship, I think it's fair. Our leases, when they are not renewed, roll over traditionally, and we operate under the existing lease. Although it may have expired, we are, as Jeff said, we've had a couple of discussions recently. We expect to be together in the very near future to finalize the document before us. As you've seen the 3 previous leases come before you, I would expect this one in the very near future, if not at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the last question I have, can you paint a picture of when this project is completed, what how has this improved the positioning of the club to be a community centre?
Well, part of the initiatives that we have in this project are to do with the event management side of our business. So it's things like pipe and drape, tables and chairs, things that we can use on the pad itself in a more temporary basis, portable draft machines, things that we can use to offer service that we don't offer now. So that'll improve the service for event functions and management. But it'll also improve our ability to earn income, which is important when it comes to turning money back into the facility like we've continued to do as a nonprofit. So it kind of ties hand in hand. And then as far as the curling component, the improvements that we intend to make through this grant are going to apply equally as effectively to the curling components. So, you know, a bar improvement, for example, is something that we'll use during the curling season, not just when we're running events. So it's kind of all encompassing. I'm purposely channeling a little more energy towards the community center in this application because that's the criteria for the grant application itself. So I'm not making it up. Our goal is to literally do what we can to encourage off-season use and additional uses that aren't traditionally seen in the curling center. Example being, we've got pickleball in there right now, for example, and we haven't had that since 2016. It's going very, very well, and I expect that to be something that we will probably be able to continue down into the future as well. So I'm looking at all kinds of opportunities for alternate uses for the space.
Thank you. So with that, I am, thank you. We'll certainly bring this back under Mayor's business for your request. And just want to close off. You had mentioned that Curl BC's recognition and awarding you the Ron Houston Administrator of the Year Award. And obviously we're very proud of the fact that you were received such a recognition from Curl BC. It was, and through them, Jeff is not only the general manager of the club, but a very skilled head ice technician. He's maintained this dual role at the club, working countless hours for over 5 years. In addition to these paid roles, Jeff also wears many hats at the club, depending on what is needed for its success. That's obvious, I think, today. And so with that, I wanted to take the opportunity to give you a small token of appreciation on behalf of Mayor and Council in the city of Dawson Creek. We had this little made up, and for Council, we thought it was certainly appropriate. And there's a local lady and artist who's doing these really amazing things that we got done up for you, and we want to congratulate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For all of your work, and hopefully that playing with pride at the city of the curling club, and congratulations.
Thank you. A very pleasant surprise, totally unexpected. It's not easy to shock me.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your time, everyone.
More amazing, Brenda can't be quiet.
She doesn't tell me anything what goes on.
She can't. She's sworn to secrecy. So that concludes delegations. We have one late item that we have, or two late items, I'm sorry, yes we do. The first is a letter from the Melissa Wager from Dawson Creek Society for Community Living. And so we need a motion to accept this as a late item for council. Councillor Wilbur, second. Councillor Parslow. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Obviously we, I think, spoke to this at our last meeting. The meeting Blair and I had with Mona and Brenda at Step Up and Ride, and because of a whole bunch of issues in 2020 and 2021 with COVID, the Step Up and Ride Society have experienced a loss of decline in donations and et cetera, and are in the unenviable position of closing for the month of August this year. And this is a indication of that and request of council. So, council. Councillor Parslow.
Yes, I'm aware of this, the challenges that this society and others have been facing. The question I have for staff, is this an eligible COVID, we received COVID funding. Would this be eligible to receive some of that money?
Your Worship, that question, I believe it was under the operations of the city, that was granted for the impact on the city. Although we give a grant to Step Up and Ride, it isn't a city-delivered service. Under that, we would have to check further to see if that is a possibility under those funds. At the present time, my feeling is it wouldn't be.
Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through you to staff. Having read this letter, it doesn't appear as though there's a specific ask associated with it or a specific number. I know Natasha, through Restoration Love, is currently running an online auction fundraiser, I think, on their behalf in order to help them shore up their finances and hopefully continue the service through August. So that is one thing. I'm just, in having read the letter, I don't see a specific ask. So I was wondering if they'd indicated what they were looking for exactly.
Yeah, I guess the issue is, I think when we spoke to Mona, their monthly operating budget is about 10 or 12 grand a month, I think, if I remember correctly. And so I read the letter to say, is there any way that the city could consider this supporting it? But that you're right, they haven't put a specific request in there for us to do that. So. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to staff, do we have anything left in grant funding that they could apply for? Or I can't remember if we changed that, who can apply when, but I know we have a little bit, and I know Councillor Javetkov's cringing next to me. I don't have to look, but do we have something that's a possibility for them to apply for?
If we have anything left in there, I believe it's in the $1,700 range, and I'm going by memory. We utilized about 10,000 of it just recently for council with the decision, but I think it's in the $1,700 range. I can get you the exact number certainly very quickly, though.
We had 12 grand, I think, in it. I think we give networks 7,500 or so in their tax, and another for the hockey recently. So there's a couple thousand at the most. Thank you. So I don't see a motion, Brenda,
Yeah, through Your Worship, just to receive the letter.
for information. Thank you. Councillor Javetkov?
I'd make a motion that we donate the remaining grant money to the society.
Step Up and Ride, whatever's left. Can we get an approximate amount that we should just have in there? About 1,700, Flavia? Okay, 1,500 to the remaining grant to Step Up and Ride. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parslow. Discussion?
Your Worship, just
Go ahead.
one thing on that. So I think it's certainly a worthy cause to do that. They may or may not have the staff to operate in. I know that was a bit of a challenge as well. I think in our discussion was that very few staff put in a lot of hours. So is it the intent of our council to move forward with this donation regardless of whether that means a difference in the August operation is all I wanted to clarify.
Councillor Javetkov?
Well, there's a considerable amount of fundraising going on outside of our city money here, but I think we contribute to that, and their staffing, I mean, they deal with it as they normally do. So I think we, donate the money and hope for the best.
All right.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Council? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we'll advise Mona and Brenda of the council decision. The next item, we have a late item from the Dawson Creek Sportsman Club in regards to a request of a letter of support for the Sportsman Club. Do we have a motion to receive this, approve this late item? Councillor Earl, move. Second. Councillor Wilbur, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And they're looking for an updated letter of support for a project that they have underway. And we did provide a letter of support, I think, for it earlier. Councillor Earl?
So we need to revise the letter and
Yeah.
resubmit?
Just, I
Okay.
think they're just looking for a new letter of support
Okay.
from us as a result of some changing in the financial metrics. So,
Okay, then so moved that we provide said letter of support based on the updated metrics.
thank you. Second, Councillor Dweckhoff. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And that's good for our late items. New councillor business? Councillor Earl? Oh, sorry. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a mention. Many of us in the community know David Johnson, and he's out there advocating about accessibility, and I think he's going to meet with the mayor soon. So I just wanted to put it out there to those listening, to businesses. When David comes and talks about accessibility, he's not talking about brick and mortars. He's not talking about putting in new doorways and activation buttons. What he's talking about is making your business accessible for self-advocates to find employment. So sometimes that means adaptive equipment. And I know I've seen them at City Hall, and I know I have them at my place of work, but desks that you can stand up while you're working rather than sitting down. So small pieces, inexpensive, that can be put in place to allow people who have disabilities, not necessarily physical, can obtain employment. So if David comes knocking, that's what he's talking about. He is working on a brochure to hand out that talks about really what accessibility is in our community. So it's not always bricks and mortar, and it's not always a physical disability. Sometimes there's other barriers in place. So I just want to say thank you, David, for being true to the core, staying there, and he's still knocking on doors even when they get closed. So I just wanted to mention David because he's high energy, he's lovable, and I don't think he's going to stop till he gets the message of accessibility out there. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and let people know what he's actually trying to message out to the community. So thank you to David.
Thank you, Councillor Wilbur. Any other councillor business? Minutes. We have 5.1. We have the minutes of a regular meeting of City Council of June 28th for adoption. Move Councillor Javetkov, second Councillor Parslow. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And the minutes of our special meeting of council for July 6, 2021 for adoption. Councillor Wilbur, second Councillor Earl. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And any business arising out of those minutes for anyone? Staff? Go ahead, Councillor Wilbur.
Thank you, through you to staff, I guess. Do we have an update on the Dare to Dream Society? Have they picked a new date? Or is that later in the agenda? Can't remember.
Chante?
Through your worship, they are going to go July 31st and August 1st, which is a long weekend on Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you. Yeah, weather caused them to postpone, and so hopefully the August weekend is conducive to the festival. Thank you. Next item we'll go to is our correspondence, item 7.1. We have an email from resident Angela Grant, a resident at 1501 95th Avenue, concerning a grievance regarding a light post replacement that occurred during the construction of the paving project at 15th Street. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll make a motion that we have administration try and rectify this in their favor. I could speak to it if we get a seconder.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur? Go ahead, Councillor Javetkov.
Yeah, so it sounds like this was an issue with the city, and I don't think it's fair to put the homeowner there in a position where they're unable to use their property or to lose some of their property. So I think that it's only fair that we try and rectify it, and I don't know the details of moving that light post, but you know, I'm sure if it's investigated that there is a possibility to move it.
Administration? Kevin?
Yeah, through your worship. In order to move the light standard, we have an estimate of between $5,000 to $10,000. So it's in that neighborhood.
So the location, I drove by it, and I drive by it fairly often on my way home. It's on the corner of the alleyway on the easement at the sidewalk, and it looks to me like the gate for property is on the property line. And so I'm assuming the access that she used to have into the gate was from the alleyway in. I'm assuming, and now because of the position of the sign of the new light post, that's restricting her access.
Yeah, so through your worship, just a little bit of background on this and just how we've got to where we are. When the design was completed for the streetlights by the electrical engineer, they used an aerial photography to do the designs. Of course, didn't see the gate that was on the property at that time because there is no driveway there. Had they seen the driveway, then it would have probably triggered something different. So design was completed, contractor went out, installed the streetlight bases. At that point, the homeowner did raise some concern with the city about the location of the light. Staff felt that it was two things. One, it was on the edge of the property and that it should not cause a major issue. And two, that's, through the designs, it was designed to be there. So, we left it there at that moment in time. The homeowner came back later once the light was installed and has subsequently, we've been dealing with them, and now the request in front of council asking it to be relocated. We did work with the homeowner to see if there was something we could do to adjust the gate that she currently has, to see if that would improve it, but we were unsuccessful in that.
Okay, so the direction is from the motion that you will like to ask administration to bring a report back to us in terms of ramifications of moving the light and costs, et cetera, and council then can make a decision based on that. Got that right, Councillor Jeveka? Yeah, good. Councillor Parslow, go ahead.
Thank you. So the rectification that you proposed would cause a loss of the green space that she cites in this letter?
So, through your worship, what we had proposed is just enlarging the gate to the north, which would then create a little bit more space away from the light standard. For whatever reason, it was not acceptable to the homeowner.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll ask for that report to come back, and council can make a decision in terms of ramifications of doing the work and the cost. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 7.2, we have a letter from Trevor O'Dwyer from the Dawson Creek Seal Swim Club regarding their annual permission to allow RVs to park at the pool during their event on August 6th to the 8th. Councillor Parslow.
I move that we grant their request.
Thank you. Second. Councillor Wilbur. Discussion? Comments? Staff?
Your Worship, not a lot to add. I think this is, they've requested this previously, I believe. We also have barricades at the site as well, so nothing to mobilize or demobilize as far as having those established there.
Thank you. Councillor Jeveka.
He's asking for picnic tables to be hauled. Where do we haul picnic tables from?
So, Your Worship, we would haul the picnic tables. We have some picnic tables within the city. They're the brown ones. There's two already at the Kenborg Aquatic Center. So what they do is they'll do some kind of an event with the group on the Saturday night. So we have hosted this before.
Thank you. Any further comments, council? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 7.3, we have a letter from Caitlin Treble from the Nalakan Friendship Center regarding a request for a subsidy on their 2021 property tax assessment. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll make a motion that we deny the request.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Parslow, discussion? Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, it's getting to be a common practice to ask the city to contribute to taxes, and I don't know where it stops, but these organizations, I think, need to look to the community, I guess. It's a community initiative. It's a society that basically survives on the support of the community, and I think it's only fair that they solicit the community first.
Thank you. Further comments, council? Yeah, I think honestly, we just awarded $7,500, I think, at our meeting a month ago to Networks Ministry for exactly this, and that was the issue that I was concerned about because we're on Pettigrew Christian School and we have Nalakan, and with $12,000 in total in grants, it made it a little difficult to get to all of them. So, Councillor Parslow.
Yes, so my understanding from reading this letter, and I must say I really appreciate the work that's been done at the Narrowton for sure. But I think I may be reading this incorrectly, but they made a mistake. They didn't realize the cumulative total of the 3 properties. That's how I view it, and I can't sort of want to get council set a precedent by when you make a mistake, we'll cover it. I just think that's a dangerous precedent.
But in fairness, Networks did exactly the same thing. They purchased the property and it was tax exempt, and just didn't realize they had a tax bill and came to us with that. So I appreciate it, right? That's part of what it is. And anyway, yeah, we have to go ahead, Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and at the risk of sounding somewhat hypocritical, as I was the one who brought forward the motion to grant the Networks grant, I did, when I first heard about the issue Networks was having, I did proactively reach out to Nalakan at the beginning of February and advise them of the situation with Networks, and aware that they just purchased the Bergeron building and that they may find themselves in a similar situation. So the fact that the letter is appearing before us 6 months later and almost a full 2 weeks after property taxes were due would make it difficult for me to support this. And as you said, our budget for granting things of this nature is not what it once was. So while I echo Councillor Parzow's sentiment that I do appreciate the work they're doing, I don't know that I could support this at the time.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And we're 10:37, so we'll take a 5-minute recess for break, and then we'll be back at 10:45. Thank you. So our next item, 8.1, we have reports. Report number 21113 from the Public Works Manager regarding request for quotations on a tandem axle hydro excavator. Councillor Javetkov.
I'll move that report number 21-113. I better put on my specs. The report number 21-113 from the Public Works Manager request for quotations 2021-27, 2021 tandem axle hydro excavator to be received. Further, that council award request for quotations 2021-27, 2021 tandem axle hydro excavator to Weimar Equipment for a total of $470,661 plus applicable taxes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl, discussion? Administration, any comments? Kevin?
Yeah, just through your worship, I know we did chat about this, I think when we were going through the budget process, but this particular unit will certainly provide some flexibility and efficiency for us. What we find right now is that our current flusher truck slash hydro excavator truck is doing double duty, and we often have to pull it away from sanitary flushing to do various digs. So, and our current truck cannot be utilized in the winter in the cold months. So, having this unit, we'll be able to concentrate primarily on our excavations and then also utilize it during the cold weather months. It'll be much.
Thank you, Kevin. Council, any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 8.2, we have report number 21112 from the Development Services Manager regarding 801 to 817th Alaska Avenue remedial action. Councillor Earl? Okay. Thank you. Conflict? we still have quorum. That's the worry. Councillor Parslow?
Just procedural question. Whoever makes this recommendation, do you want to read the whole thing, or can we exempt our practices for this particular?
You can exempt the practice if you choose.
I move the recommendation as written.
Thank
That's
you.
okay.
Second? Councillor Javetkov? Councillor Parslow, did you want to speak to the motion?
Well, the property in question, 801 to 817 Alaska Avenue, remedial action has been before us for quite some time, and we have a force engineering report, and it's prime location. Lakeview Credit Union's affected by this. Let's get this thing done.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov, sorry.
So I've got some concerns about the recommendation. It's unfortunate that this has been ongoing for just about 4 years now. The recommendation to reslope is going to take probably 20% of that lot out of commission. So if there are any other liens against it or that are diminishing the value, and you take another 20% out of commission, it reduces the value more. The other thing is exposing that soil. We know it's contaminated. We know what soil smells like when it's contaminated by petroleum products. To recommend that this soil is placed on the surface, I can imagine what the odor is going to be like, and then the other option of building planters, and I think there's 23 on the list, which basically surround the lot, which again makes it unusable. And I don't think the number of planters that's required there is accurate. I think there's going to be a number more. The whole thing, to me, it was the option of reconstructing the retaining wall was mentioned in one of Force Engineering's initial letters. That option, to me, should be investigated further. Like, I can remember asking for a price, and we never did get a price on it. But that option would make the lot usable as a parking lot. Whether it's, some kind of a cement concrete retaining wall there that's buttressed, even if we had to sacrifice the alley to create the buttresses, or sheet pilings of some sort, like an engineered design for a retaining wall there, to me is a lot more practical, because that basically keeps the lot in a usable condition. So, like, I guess I'm gonna vote for this thing to keep it on the books, but I just, the end result here, I just see it as a deep, dark hole that we're going deeper and deeper and deeper, and at the end, we're gonna have something here that's cost the city a fortune, and there's no use for it. So, maybe I've talked myself into voting against it. Like, to me, there needs to be more work. I think a retaining wall would, keep the lot viable. Like, we don't know what other liens are against it. I mean, it may be, there may be no value there now. We don't know that. And we're continuing on trying to deal with this issue, with some unknowns, but anyways, that's my concern.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. I just realized that the hydraulics in my chair are broken and I keep shrinking down to the floor. I'm gonna lose some more weight. Question for you to staff, and it's around the 60-day notice. Did we not already give this property owner 60-day notice to clean it up? Or this was what would happen? Like, I read this till I was cross-eyed, and I'm wondering why do we have to go through that process again if we already gave him 60 days notice to clean it up, or else we were gonna take charge? Well, why the process again?
Blair?
Your Worship, I will defer this to Kevin, who's been dealing with this, but
Oh.
I believe it is actually because we had dealt with this in a closed meeting, because it was land legal. There's information that's came back to us now saying you must deal with this in an open meeting, which is somewhat of a surprise to me in the years that we have done with land, legal, labor in camera, but I believe that is the fundamental reason for this now, with recommendation from our legal.
Kevin?
Yes, so through your worship, Blair is correct. And initially, when we started the discussions, because land and legal, we were in a closed situation. But as this is a remedial action under the community charter, everything needs to be in the open and go through that process. So that's why we're going through it again. And just to touch on a couple of questions that Councillor Dvetkov had, absolutely valid concerns. But again, as we go through the remedial action process, it's not necessarily about the best use of the property. It's about dealing with the safety issue and also through an economical fashion. So unfortunately, it's trying to deal with that immediate ongoing risk and maybe not the best end result, but I do understand what Councillor was saying.
Thank you. Councillor Dvetkov?
So, dealing with the immediate risk is fair comment, although it's been going on since 2018. The value, or the cost to the city in the long run, if things go sideways all the way through, if the landowner refuses to do the job, if we have to end up doing it, if that soil is placed on the surface and the odor becomes an issue with the public, which I'm convinced it will, because I've seen other issues around town, and we have to haul that material out to Gordondale, and so the costs escalate, and we're looking at in excess of $250,000. There may be other alternatives at this point through, some thinking out of the box, to use a flavor of the day term. I think there needs to be some discussion on it. There may be some other options that can be done to, where the money that is spent has some value at the end of the day.
Thank you. Further discussion, council? You ready? Go ahead, Blair.
Your worship, just, I mean, to touch on this, we've dealt with this a number of times over the last, I will say, 18 months particularly, this piece of property. It is unfortunate that the owner of this property has not taken action. He is well aware of the problem. He may or may not be in a position to financially do it, but we also, if he has assets, have the ability to go after his assets or her assets. It then becomes a legal issue, and we will be spending money legally. But to take this on, I could be wrong, but I think if the city ends up with this from a tax sale, and we could very well be in that position, I don't think we will be in a position to sell this property because of the contamination. So there are a number of factors that have to be looked at. We've dealt with it. The discussions of council before were to look at a sloping. We've talked about those options prior. But we can, pursue whatever council's wish is to get this corrected. At the end of the day, because the individual has not acted on this, I believe it's going to end up with the city anyway as a city-owned piece of property that will be a liability to the city in some sense because of the contamination on the site. As I understand it, and Brenda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that as a result of taking it back under tax sale, if that's where this lands, we're not responsible to have to move forward to clean it. It would remain there on site. So just some interesting things when people don't pay their taxes and the predicament it puts the city and really the other taxpayers in the city on the hook for.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I think it would be wise to I guess, defeat this motion and maybe go back to the drawing board, even if it's put off for a month to the next meeting to make a final decision. But if there's some discussion and maybe some investigation with the engineering firm and the neighbors to see if there's some other options there that will resolve the issue and have a viable piece of property at the end of the day.
Thank you. Further comments, council? Councillor Parslow?
Just a question to staff. If perchance there was some development, some building put up there, wouldn't all the sorry.
Brenda? Oh, sorry.
There we go.
There you go.
The question is, if there was to be development on that property, wouldn't the contaminated soil issue still be there and need to be, the soil be removed or what have you? I mean, what are is there really a viable option of a building going on that property without dealing with the contaminated soil issue?
No, there's not. Kevin, would
Thank
that
you.
be a correct statement? I think that, like any site, and we've seen a couple in our city that have been developed, the reclamation of the site has to occur first and meet the environmental standards to develop.
So that's why I continue to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, no, I support the motion. I would like to see this dealt with. It's kind of been a conundrum that's ongoing. My thought process, though, is, and I guess through you, your worship, to staff, is it possible to what Councillor Javetkov's saying, is to explore removing the dirt or those other options so the value's there. So my concern is, it's at the traffic circle, and we're gonna have piles of dirt sitting there, smelly or not smelly. Like, I look at aesthetics, and that's coming into our community. So it's not just about for me, the retaining wall. It has to be dealt with, that lot has to be dealt with, but what are we gonna leave after we fix it? So I'm wondering if within 60 days, council can hear back on maybe what those options are and what we're looking at for cost.
Contaminated soil can be disposed of at the landfill sites like Secure, Tervita, and those guys. Kevin?
Yeah, through your worship. So I think what's important for council to know right now is if we move forward with this and we give notice to the owner, they may come and actually deal with it. So let's not get caught up on how that'll look until we're at a position where the owner hasn't complied with the remedial action. Then, we can look at options and as we move forward.
Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, well, it was used as a parking lot prior to this issue coming. So is it not usable again as a parking lot if that sloughing is stabilized and the soil is not disturbed?
The owner cut off access. That's why it's not being used now.
No, I know it's not used now, but if that alley is stabilized, so the corrective action is taken. For example, if there was a retaining wall installed and the soil wasn't disturbed, so there is no odor, could it not be used for a parking lot again?
Yes.
Through your worship, yes, it could.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the development or the use that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about developing a skyscraper there. I'm just talking about having a useful, viable property, and parking is obviously one of those uses that is useful.
But we're getting into some discussion here where we don't own the lot, we don't have control of the lot. All we're talking about is stabilizing some hazard that exists for our alleyway. And I think the aspect we have to determine is how do we minimize or how do we rectify that? And that's been the discussion that we've been on going for a while. Councillor Wilbur, one last time. We've had lots of discussion.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I hope the landowner comes forward and deals with the issue. My comment before was, I don't want to see us 18 months down the road having the same discussion on what we're going to do with this property. So I'd rather be prepared, because so far the landowner has not done anything. So I would just like to be prepared that come 60 days, we can say, all right, let's move ahead with this plan, is where I was going. Because at this point, I don't have much faith the landowner is going to come forward, because they haven't, but I am hopeful that they will. So I just don't want to be here in 18 months discussing the same piece of property and seeing more deterioration. And we already know it's leaning against a hydro pole. So, I mean,
We are
that's
directing
all.
staff
Yeah.
to begin that work. That's what this motion will do.
And I appreciate that. I just want to be planned for 60 days from now, what's going to be our next option.
Thank you. And now I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. We'll get Councillor Earl, if he can come get the staff to get him back in. 8.3, we have, I'll wait till Jeremy's in his chair. We have report number 21114 from the General Manager of Development Services regarding emergency sanitary sewer bypass pumping equipment. Councillor Parslow.
Move that report number 21-114 from the General Manager of Development Services, the emergency sanitary sewer bypass pumping equipment be received. Further, Council authorized funding from the 2021 sanitary sewer upgrade capital budget to be used for the purchase of 3 flat deck trailers for emergency bypass pumping operations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Councillor Parslow?
So there are some pinch points that need to be dealt with. In emergency situations, this will enable council to staff to quickly remediate the problem.
Further discussion, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 8.4, we have report number 21107 from the Financial Services Manager regarding the 2021 property tax collection. Councillor Parslow, go ahead.
Move that report 21-107 from the Financial Services Manager 2021 property tax collection be received for information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Javetkov, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 8.5, we have report number 21072 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding our asset retirement obligations policy. Councillor Wilbur.
I will remove that, I will move that report, get it off the agenda. Report number 21-072 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding asset retirement obligations ARO policy be received. Further, that the policy attached to this report be approved pending the required 30-day review.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl, discussion? Blair?
Your Worship, just to be very clear on this does not include a fund, a replacement fund. This is not what this is speaking to, just for the clarity of the public who may be watching. Financially, each of our buildings, we are looking, and we've had that discussion financially, that we are going to look at beginning to put savings away for the replacement, whether it be City Hall, a Memorial Arena, and so on, as we do. This is not that. This is a remedial action, so we have to look at it in the sense that if we were to have to take something down, what is our liability? Is there asbestos involved? Are there things like that that are going to come into play here? As well, the demolition cost is part of the replacement cost, not part of this. So just a couple of key factors when you read it under this that I wanted to make sure people were clear on.
Thank you. Flavia?
Sorry, Your Worship, there is a 4 minutes presentation from the external auditors, not ours, but KPMG, that gives a good introduction. What is this about? And I think that would be interesting to go through. It's a short, but this is straightforward. What's the requirement?
Awesome. Okay. And we're going to show that video. It's about a 4-minute video, and we'll play that now.
Council on the impact of Public Sector Accounting Board's new asset retirement obligation, how it's going to affect your municipality. This is a new requirement from the Public Sector Accounting Board introduced late in 2018, which is required to be implemented by municipalities for fiscal years beginning on or after April 1st, 2021. This means that for most municipalities, this will be implemented for their 2022 fiscal year, but there is the option to adopt before. What asset retirement obligation accounting covers are those legal and contractual requirements to retire a tangible capital asset or another asset type item. Things such as buildings with asbestos, underground fuel storage tanks that require removal at end of life, certain sewage or wastewater treatment plants that are required to be dismantled due to environmental ordinances, certain leaseholds where your municipality might be required at the end of lease to return the premises to its original condition. These all are the types of things that might be covered under scope of this section. So the asset retirement obligation accounting covers those legal contractual requirements for benefit to settle obligation.
It has subtitles.
While this is a new accounting for the public sector accounting world, this is a very common
We can read what
practice.
It's got subtitles.
In the private sector, with existing standards for asset retirement obligations in private sector accounting and under IFRS. In the public sector accounting world, your municipality is already currently accounting for contaminated site obligations, which cover inactive sites that have known contamination exceeding environmental standard. Asset are different because these are capturing those legal contractual requirements, no necessity that be in excess of an environmental standard. The fact that there is a regulation requiring you to remove or retire that is enough to make it a requirement under this section. The other thing in scope for this accounting section is landfill accounting. Your municipality is already recognizing a liability for solid waste landfill post-retirement care, but that accounting is changing with asset retirement obligations and will require that obligation to be recognized at the beginning of that landfill site. This means if your municipality has an active in-use landfill, particularly one which is in the of its life, the accounting will be most affected and will require an adjustment upon implementation of this section. Your accounting group is going to need the help of others in your municipality, facilities, public works, engineering, legal, as well as your engagement as implementation. They will actively need the engagement of those who understand the facilities, know where those contractual legal obligations lie, and can factor those into scope. The most important critical for municipalities to be working on now is identifying those possible in-scope assets, identifying those things that could give rise to a retirement obligation, and having the time to assess those before 2021-22. We at KPMG are eager to help. We developed a number of resources that can assist you in terms of scoping, identification of impact, guides to assist you. I'd be thrilled to talk with you if you have any questions. My name is Bailey Church with KPMG, and you can reach me at bchurch@kpmg.ca. Thanks so much.
Well, perhaps we can get that video flipped to council as well, just so we can see it as well.
Yeah, through your worship, actually in the report, there is a link to this
Awesome.
video.
Okay.
So like if needed, go straight to the...
That's awesome. Thank you. Further discussion?
That was good accessibility subtitles, just saying.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I did, prior to this, watch the video, so I'll know for next time. So just for my own edification, Public Sector Accounting Board is essentially a nonprofit that governs the profession and institutes best practices. Just out of curiosity, are these practices also being adopted at provincial and federal levels for their assets?
Yes, for
Okay.
every single entity of the government of
Lovely.
Canada.
All right.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the recommendation that report number 21-115 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding 2022 permissive tax exemption report selecting participants be received. Further, that the organizations that requested a delegation to council regarding their permissive tax exemption be invited to attend a special meeting on September 13th, 2021 to give a presentation to the council regarding their activities and to provide any concerns related to the change of the permissive tax exemption policy.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Comments? Councillor Javetkov, sorry? Did you want to speak, Chairman?
So, after that, those presentations, is that when we would make a recommendation or a motion to remove some of those organizations?
Administration?
Yes, Your Worship, you give the opportunity to the individuals, or the groups, pardon me, and then following that, council makes their determination on the list, tax exempt list.
Okay.
This is what is there before you now, though.
So are all of the organizations presenting, or should we identify ones that are of a concern now so that we get a presentation from them?
Go ahead, Flavia.
So through your worship, there is a list here attached to this report of those that actually requested. I would like to be in a delegation, but if there is anyone specific that's not on this list that you'd like to be presenting, or be available for questions, we can definitely contact them.
So do we need to identify that now or after the meeting?
It would be preferable to identify now, because then we would have, if there is anyone in addition to the list where they are saying, well, I would like to present, said I would like another 2 or 3, if we would know now, would be better for us, because then we can send the invitation.
So I still don't get it. Should I identify them now?
Yes.
So one of them is the driver house. And I think the Bethel is presenting because they're new.
Yes.
And the other one is the, the Dawson Creek Youth Center Society. That's a not-for-profit social related. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further,
Anyone?
Councillor Parslow?
Just a question, and then I will have some other comments to make. Concerning worship, places of worship, they're statutorily exempt, but I notice on the list there's one place of worship where just the land is listed. That is not statutorily exempt, is it? That's my understanding, it's the place of worship. It's not necessarily the manse, the parking lot, the church hall, but I don't see any breakout with all those places of worship. It is just, for many, with the exception of one where I see a land,
Yeah.
there's no distinction between a place of worship, a parking lot, a church hall,
So-
and I think there should be.
Yeah, so through your worship, the decision, the statutory decision is on the hands of a BC assessment, so it's the province, and what they provided to us is a percentage of what they are granting. So this is actually brand new, because in previous years, we are assuming differently from the methodology that should be. So we contacted them 2 years ago and said, okay, can you provide us the breakdown of what you're giving as a statutory? And then we ended learning that every single worship institution had a percentage attached to what they are granting. And this is based on their own, their assessors going to those worship locations and identify, okay, this represents 75% what would be considered a worship area. Therefore, council, you would be granting the 25%. It would be then a discretion from council for the remaining portion. So this report that I'm attaching on the Schedule A, it shows what they are granting, the percentage they are granting as a statutory, and then the difference is where council grants supremacy tax exemption.
Well, that's, thank you. Interesting. As I was sharing with our CAO, I appreciate many features of this. But and this is purely, I guess, how my mind works. When we looked at the lease agreements and we looked at budgets and so on, there was a percentage that we were aiming for. And when I read the Fort St. John permissive tax exemption policy, I'm clear in my mind that they have a dollar amount, sort of a cap, on how much within their community they're willing to has as a total dollar amount for permissive tax exemptions. In other words, they also seem to have a policy that everyone, regardless, I mean, I'm not talking about the statutorily exempt, all those where it's truly a local decision, should be contributing to the what they call the essential services. And so they've changed things so that it would be 75% of the municipal assessment. And I'm just wondering, you know, I don't recall a discussion other than general support with the phased-in approach, etc., about, well, what are we heading for here? What are we trying to capture? Because ultimately, you know, services are provided to these various places, and they are providing good services to the community as well. But they, in Fort St. John, they've sort of said, well, everybody should be contributing to some of the core services. But I don't think we've ever discussed what are we aiming for here. And I tend to think that needs to be discussed, because we have in this presentation also two new ones, both of which I would think eminently qualify for permissive tax exemption of some form. But, you know, you can have some erosion of your tax base that's going on here whilst we're forever meeting increased costs. So I think there's some merit to having some ceiling of the total dollars associated with permissive tax exemptions. Now, the question, the answer you gave, so is it fair to say then that if we looked at the places of worship, we have discretion for 25% of that municipal taxation?
The current policy approved about 30 days ago, that's not how we are proceeding. The way that we are proceeding right now is there is a cap of a minimal expected municipal tax that you would like to, we are granting to the properties. So let's say, for example, the places of worship, if they exceed in the calculation of this permissive exemption portion, when applying our rates, it would exceed 15,000 in taxes, that's what they would be paying. So it's same thing for social housing. If they exceeded in the calculation, they exceed 10,000, because that's what the limit that council is giving. I'm giving you a grant of 10,000 in tax in permissive tax. If you exceed that, that's what you'll be paying. But under this difference between the minimum grant 10,000 and let's say 15,000, we are granting 4 years for them to pay. Instead of paying straight 5,000, we are breaking down in 25, 45, 70, and then on the 4th year, they would be paying fully the excess of this minimum amount, which is not the same methodology of Fort St. John, and I am not fully aware of the whole methodology used. I did read, and I don't see the same way that was presented here, but it is different. The methodology we are following is not the same from the Fort St. John.
Thank you. So we categorized it. We have categories in which we've locked in the properties that we give permissive tax. We put caps on them.
Yeah, the caps
We're
on the
going to structure that over a 4-year period in terms of how people will then, who are impacted now by this change, that will get to the point where they're paying that full. And so now we're asking those properties who are impacted, who want to give a presentation to council as a delegation, to please do that, because we have approved this policy.
Yes. And then through your worship, just to add to, when we are talking about this 4 years granting, right, gradually granting for those that you exceeded the maximum property tax, when we are communicating to BC assessment, normally they are expecting you to say, how much % are you granting for permissive tax? So right now we say 100%. 100% for those organizations is what? Under this new methodology, FTU, those organizations that are exceeding, we're going to come to BC assessment and say, okay, this year we are granting 90%. Next year, 85%. So it all depends on the method of the calculation to reach the goal of the excess of the maximum property tax to be paid that they would be able to pay.
Thank you. Go ahead, one more.
Yeah, just this is again, I'm just referencing the Fort St. John one here, but I'm trying to understand. So I want to talk about the non-municipal portion of what we collect. So do these properties continue to pay school tax?
If they are in the excess of the maximum for municipal, let's say they will be granted only 90% of the assessed value, they will pay taxes over the requisition, school tax, regional.
Regional hospital
So
district.
we don't have to remit the school tax that we've given permission, exemption to.
We don't send if we don't rent. No, but if they did pay a portion, then we will remit
That portion.
the portion that they will pay.
Okay, because just to illustrate where my confusion here, I'm just reading from the Fort St. John here. Commencing on January the 1st, 2022, the city will cease to exempt 100% of the non-municipal portion of recipient exemption. Can you, I should have asked you this ahead of Flavia, so I do apologize.
Yes.
Can you explain that to me?
It's hard. I did I read that, and I still don't understand myself how they will be able, if they're gonna grant 100% of municipal, how they cannot grant for the collection of other agencies because it's attached to a percentage of the assessed value. So you can't go to BC assessment and say, I'm granting 100%, but just for municipal, because other collections, they need to pay. That's not how BC assessment works, and that's not how the property tax works. So I would need, in addition to what's written there, they try to explain, and I don't remember asking my tax clerk to contact them to understand how they're going to do this calculation, because everything's based on the BC assessment value.
Right.
So if you are granting 100% of municipal, by default, you are granting to the other collections. So how they are doing, I really don't know.
So
I
we're
don't know
not
if it's going to
paying
be
the
through a
school
grant.
taxes for speakers, let's say, use an example. We're not paying the school taxes.
No, we don't pay school tax. But we need to understand, like, one good example where the residents ended paying when those properties are not paying is the requisition portion, like the hospital and the regional. Because what happened, they come to us and say, our requisition for this year is 1.7 million. So what we do, we get this 1.7 million and split amongst all those that are paying taxes. So if you're not on the list of paying taxes, therefore I will pay a little more, you will pay a little more there because those we are granted. This happens on requisition. With the school is a rate. So everybody that you pay that specific rate depending on the class that you are. So there is a difference on the methodology of calculating those taxes.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and just to Flavia, with respect to not just the delegations, but the applications for the permissive tax exemption, keeping in mind just how we're developing our relationships with the city-operated facilities by nonprofits, and as part of their lease agreements moving forward, I do believe they have to present us with annual financials as part of the application process for permissive tax exemption. Is there any requirement that either delegations or applicants provide financials for the year?
Yeah, so through Your Worship, all the applications, they have a financial report.
Okay.
They will have. seat property or non-seat property, all of them are required to provide their the last updated financial statement.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asked, just out of a sense of fairness to the nonprofits we are dealing with through city facilities, is yes, this is not a direct subsidy or a fee for service like some of those others, but it is, as you said, foregone revenue is a type of subsidy, and that's a subsidy that's paid by every other taxpayer to I guess float their portion of what they would otherwise pay. So I think with fairness, and if for no other reason, we should be asking for those. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Flavia. 8.7, we have report number 21116 from the Chief Financial Officer, our consolidated actual to budget variance report for June 30th, 2021. Councillor Parslow.
I move the report number 21116 from the Chief Financial Officer, the consolidated actual to budget variance report, June the 30th, 2021, be received for information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Move to item 9, bylaws, report number 21110 from the Development Services Manager regarding zoning amendment 2103, bylaw 4506 for third reading. Councillor Wilbur move, second. Councillor Earl, discussion.
Excuse me, through your worship.
Brenda?
That was third reading and adoption.
Third and adoption, sorry. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Sorry. He's good. Report number 21111 from the Development Services Manager, zoning amendment bylaw 4507 for third reading and adoption. I need to speak to this because it was during one of the delegations I was identified as a property owner in one of those items, and because I'm not sure that constitutes the mayor and my bride having a personal conflict as it relates to this being identified in the material that was presented and identified as a property owner who is an RS1 versus RS2. And I never considered myself in conflict up until I saw that in the material. And so it raises a point for me that, and honestly, I look to administration for that, Brenda.
Yeah, through your worship, if you feel you have a conflict, you should declare it. It doesn't matter what time you realize that.
Yeah.
And then you would, if you would.
It was just that it was because our property was identified in the zoning map that was presented. Then are you considered then a implied in there as a impacted party? Now, I honestly, I never considered myself in conflict in it. We all have conflicts, and I wasn't directly associated with it, but I'm staying in. I'm going to stay in. Yeah. Yeah. Motion. Councillor Parslow.
Well, before I can make a motion on this, so it's a point of procedure here. We heard from people, and there was some, I think staff should provide us some response to the notion that they de facto, maybe, de tacit approval for a suite with the material that was presented in 2018.
So I'll ask if administration could respond to that, Christina, the property owner's presentation to council before we ask for a motion, just to clarify the process of the building plans and permitting and inspection for zoning. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. So just double checking on that, I had Bill pull out the building plans that we have on file. And as noted, on the plans at the very bottom, it notes B suite, as in basement suite and some square footage. But that's the only mention of a basement suite on the set of plans. The plans themselves show an unfinished basement. So when it was permitted as a single-family dwelling with an attached garage. And the occupancy provided was exactly the same, single-family dwelling with an attached garage. So although the set of plans made a notation that it says basement suite, 780 suite, there was no plans showing the suite, so it would be impossible for us to issue a permit or do any approvals on an unfinished basement space that the owner indicates was going to be a future suite. So it was not permitted. It was not, in my understanding is there was no discussion at the time about a future suite. That's what I have.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
So I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda, you may need to listen carefully because I'm changing the wording here. Right, the report, I removed the report number 21111 from the Development Services Manager rezoning amendment 21-04 bylaw number 4507 2021 be received. Further, zoning amendment 2104 bylaw number 4507 2021 to rezone the property at 940 89th Avenue from RS1 to RS2 be denied.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Councillor
If I
Parsons?
may speak to this, referencing the letters we received, and also reflecting on when you as mayor convened a meeting of builders and reflecting the deliberations of the, what is it called, the city's, I've forgotten the name, it's the big OCP. It was clearly indicated, from my recollection, that there was a desire that we retain some portions of the city as RS1. These people bought their property here on the understanding it was RS1. That's my understanding, and that's why I'm making the motion I'm making.
Thank you.
If I'm ever in fact, please correct me.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Parslow. As well, having had the opportunity to walk the streets in our community now every second week for a month, that above that area is very, very congested. So keeping to our OCP and having RS1 is important, and there isn't sidewalks. And though people say they have extra parking, they don't. And so I just look to the future, and I think sometimes we have to stay the course. I'm a little disappointed to find out what was brought in today as plans is not the plans that was actually given during permitting. So that disturbs me as well, but it happens they probably were conceptual plans that were brought in today, maybe. So staff can clarify that, but I am in agreement that sometimes we have to stay the course, and I know how congested it is getting up there for parking.
Thank you. Kevin?
Just a point of clarification. So the plans are the same. Both have the notation on the bottom that says B suite, and both show an unfinished basement. So they were both the same. It's just, I think the owner was holding on to the notation that says B suite at the bottom, but that is not something that we permit off. We need actually a set of plans, so they were not complete. So I think there's just a lack of understanding.
Okay, so the plans that, the conceptual plans that she had, I recognize the designer's logo. Did she not leave those? Because she was showing basement windows and all of that for a suite?
I don't believe so. I think I'd have to go through this, but the ones we have
Okay.
on file do not show
Show
a
that.
suite.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov, sorry.
Yeah, I support the motion as well. you know, these zones, RS1, are for a purpose. The people pay increased lot fees. And to change a lot in the middle of the street to RS2 basically opens up, you know, the whole rest of the zoning to convert it to RS2. And it's just, I don't think it's fair. And I appreciate the concerns that were expressed by the surrounding landowners. I've also got a concern about just advising the people that were within 30 meters. I think that should be expanded. And I appreciate the concern of the people that are, you know, they thought they had things in place. Obviously, they didn't. It's unfortunate. But like, there are 4 other lots available there in RS2. So, you know, possibly there's an option to move the house.
Yeah, the house burnt, and so they're rebuilding the house that burnt down, and then discovered that the zoning wasn't correct for them to put the suite in, so.
Your Worship, just for clarification on the issue of congestion and parking, this does have the allowable amount of parking. And just for council's information, it does meet the bylaw requirements. And that's really just for information.
Sure, thank you. Ready for the question, council? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried, thank you. 9.3, Report 21-108 from the Corporate Officer, Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 4502-2021, and Land Sale Bylaw 4508-2021 for consideration of first 3 readings. Councillor Parslow.
With the report 21-108 from the Corporate Officer, Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw number 4502-2021 and Land Sale Bylaw number 4508-2021, Sander, be received. Further, that Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw number 4502-2021 and Land Sale Bylaw number 4508-2021, Sander, be given first 3 readings.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl, discussion? Councillor Parslow, go ahead.
Well, there was a process followed of consultation required, and this is just following a decision that was made, but required some procedures to be followed, and so it's been brought before. It's not a new item to us.
Thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 9.4, report number 21-117 from the Development Services Manager regarding the fees and charges amendment bylaw 4509-2021. Councillor Earl.
I'll move that the recommendation that report number 21-117 from the Development Services Manager regarding fees and charges amendment bylaw number 4509-2021 be received. Further, that fees and charges amendment bylaw number 4509-2021 be given first 3 readings.
Thank you. Second. Councillor Wilbur, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. That concludes our bylaws. Item 10 is mayor's business. I'll just give a few updates. Peace River Regional District obviously had a process we're going through now at the RD for some different grants and aids, different requisitions. We had just actually a referendum on the weekend on a requisition bylaw of 2 of them that were put through, and they're looking at a new economic development model. And the old model used to be a North Peace Economic Development Commission, South Peace Economic Development Commission, and they kind of have, I think, evolved into a place where some of the requisitions, some of the funding weren't being done appropriately by the bylaw and by the SLP, and so they're looking at a new economic development model. They've got a company in place to look at the overall economic development model. I'm really pleased about this because I see some real benefits to us in terms of having a strategy around economic development for the region that will benefit not only the region, but each of us as funders within the within the PRRD. And so I had an interview with the firm that's doing the review by the PRRD, and tourism, healthcare, things like that that are economic development impacts or drivers can certainly have a big impact for us in the community as we relate to funding some of the initiatives that we have done traditionally on our own. Northern Lights College Rodeo team had their award ceremony about 2 weeks ago, and I was invited to go out and say hello to the kids. And it's really a cool program that the college have taken on out there, and they've developed a college rodeo program, and they've given the kids now that are in the old days, their high school rodeo days would finish at the end of high school, and now the college gives them that opportunity at furthering their education and the sport of rodeo. And they've got scholarships available for these kids, and I think they had 7 or 8 kids from all over the region now coming to school, and it's been really, really beneficial. And some of the kids now finish their education and end up staying in the community and getting really great community given back to our community. We had toured the now Bergeron Youth and Cultural Center. I know some of council were there that day and administration, and it's really a great presentation that was put together by Jana and the team at Nauakan and brought in, and fortuitous for them to have that request for that 60 scoop and the residential schools display put on through the national organization. I can't remember by who, but it was very, very informative, very impactful, and congratulations to the Nauakan team for doing that. And obviously July 3rd or 2nd or 1st, whatever the day was, where the province made the announcement of the reopening plan, and we talked a little bit about it earlier about the music festival was slated for last weekend, and the Dawson Creek and District Exhibition and Fair are scheduled for August 11th to the 15th, and we're really excited about seeing the organizing committee and team get going and moving on hosting the rodeo, whatever shape that takes this year, with the short timelines that they've had in order to execute upon it. And so I'm really, really pleased to see that happen, and hopefully the weather cooperates and gives them a opportunity of having a really successful event this year, and encourage everybody to participate. Does anybody have any questions of any of those items? Next item, 10.2, I circulated a memo to council on, I mentioned this at our last meeting, on the review of our water conservation bylaw. And so I would like to propose the following motion: that council direct our administration to review the water conservation bylaw and to bring back an alternative to allow increased access to water for residents during the summer months. And if I get a seconder, I'd like to speak to it. Councillor Javetkov, thank you. You know, as I drove around over the last few months, and you can help but see the effects of how hot, dry summer we've had, and now we're seeing fires all over the place. And to me, I think the work that we've done as a city over the last number of years in terms of building supply, building distribution, building increased access, I think we're in a different place. I believe that in terms of where we were 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, when we were looking to see where and how we would have access to supply and distribution for the future of the city. And to me, the ability for us to allow residents who wish to and choose to have increased access to water in the summer months. And I honestly, my days are Thursday and Sunday. I water Thursday and Sundays, and I water hard Thursday morning and Thursday night to be able to make sure that if I'm gone to the lake on the weekend, I only get 1 week. And so to me, if we had increased access, I'm not sure that we would use less water in that event, being able to have a little more frequency. But I would really like us to be able to consider it. I think we have the water. It gives us the ability to manage that in a way that keeps it from being a healthy infrastructure. It gives us increased access to residents who choose to want to have increased ability to keep their landscaping and yards healthy. And it increases our revenues to the city, and for us, those of us that want to pay and those that do want to pay, that gives them the ability to do that. So I would like us to look at this. It's only for those months of probably June, July, August, and September that people would be looking to have that increased access. And instead of having twice a week, maybe we go, and I talked to Kevin about it, maybe we look at an alternative where even numbered addresses water on even days and odd on odd days, and then you water 3 days a week, 1 week, and 4 the next. But you're having increased access, increased ability. So I just feel it's a opportunity that we could ask the administration to look at. I'll end there. Councillor Parslow.
Thank you. Well, I imagine as you've put this, it would still qualify, if we are required to provincial requirement that we have some water restrictions, because it's not every day you're proposing. And I'm not sure if I'm correct in asserting that there are provincial guidelines, but I've always been led to believe that it's so, and I explained to the general public that there are. But just a couple of points of concern. I just don't know the city's watering, but applying water during the heat of day is an absolute waste of resources. The best time to water is obviously in the evening and at night time. And I was wondering if that might be a feature of whatever is put forward. I know I'm just giving it to staff to consider. But another thing that is another benefit of doing this, and if I may have a personal note, a very good friend of mine is the owner of Cumsheen Rafting, based just out of Lytton. And he, of course, the Lytton fire, he doesn't live in Lytton, he lives on the bluffs south of Lytton, so his house was used by the firefighters as a base, as he has a large lake there. But his sons both lost their homes. His daughter lost her home and business. And in trepidation, they were wondering about their main business, which is Cumsheen Rafting. And he believes, he calls it a miracle, their buildings were unscathed. They only lost about $300,000 worth of equipment. But now I'm getting to the point. Part of his belief and comments by people who know better than him was that they regularly watered the plants, the area around their buildings, which had plants, and they say that probably helped as a fire prevention thing. And then reading all the stuff that's going on, it says, well, it says to me, we need to pay attention to fire protection. And I think you could put a lens on this initiative the mayor's put forward as, hey, we might prevent some grass fires if we've got things better watered.
Well, yeah, but it was part of that to me, exactly that. A green community is a healthy community, and it does minimize that risk because everything's brown and burnt in terms of lawns and around the community. So anyway, I just thought it was a worthwhile discussion. Blair?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Parslow, within our water conservation bylaw today in the city, there are times so that the watering is early in the morning and then later in the evening.
Good.
4 till 9 and 5 till 9 at night, I think. So, thank you. Any comments, questions, Council? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you for that. 10.3, we have the BC Housing Funding Programs presentation, and there wasn't a specific ask, but I would like, I think, for us to take this seriously now in terms of we've got the BC Housing Assessment. I would think it's now for us to be able to start to move this work forward and get administration directed to begin to start to say, how are we going to move it forward? What are we going to do to ensure, get that plan in place for us to see how seniors housing, affordable housing, transitional housing, women's housing, what are those needs, and begin to move that forward. And as I said, I don't know that there was a specific request in their presentation, but if we can, I think we need to bring something back soon to get this moving. Blair?
Your Worship, I think for this, and we do have some properties available, that is our key here within the city to be able to partner with BC Housing and so on. We would need to put a planning budget together for this as well. So I do think that moving this forward is important. I think it should be part of the discussion as we come enter our budget discussions this year, to look at planning for that. There's some work that has to be done. We've had some preliminary talks with BC Housing already. They've indicated that there is presently some opportunity for funding in one of the silos that they have, but we will continue to work with them, bring the information back to you, but it will also be part of our budget discussion ongoing, and we'll come up with some form of cost of what it would take to develop. For example, the old Grandview School site is a primary site in our city. We have others as well, certainly in the downtown core, but there will be some costs associated with that.
No, and I agree. I think it's complete. We've been waiting for that housing assessment report. Now we can start to move it forward. Councillor Parslow.
Well, referencing the former Grandview School property, don't you think it's time we had a community charrette about that? You know, this city's done that before with some other projects. I noticed that, well, other communities do that. I mean, and, you know, again, it's usually led by a group outside of the city, but contracted by the city. So whatever opportunities present themselves fit into an overall plan we have for that community. So I'm just wondering how is that being considered? Getting a comprehensive plan, engage the community, and then we can, whatever we build is part of a big scope and sequence.
I think it's exactly what we have to do. We got to get somebody to start to put that council to say, okay, we're going to put some planning money now into this to begin to move that forward. And what is the vision of the development based on the BC Housing? What are the needs we need to develop? Begin to put that model together. Engage the various organizations, Dawson Creek Society for Community Living, Native Housing, the South Peace Community Resources, Northern Health, School District, all the organizations, begin to put that plan in place and then begin to then engage the community to ensure that we start to move it forward in a way that meets the needs of our community for the future. Absolutely. Brenda?
Yeah, through your worship, we should have a motion from council directing staff.
Okay. So if we can have a motion that we are going to direct administration to bring back a proposal for council for our 2022 budget year for a funding to begin a planning process for our BC, based on the BC Housing Needs Assessment report we've completed.
So
Move, Councillor Javetkov, second Councillor Parslow. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. 10.4, so the delegation that gave us a request that the city lead a proposal on the creation of a child care action plan. And as I think about this, I think we have done, so the presentations I've been dealing and bringing back to council, we had the report from Urban Matters a month or so ago indicating that if we have funding that they could develop that. I think they're looking for us to come up with a formal motion that we're going to lead the creation of a child care action plan based on that presentation that I heard today. Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Yes, well, obviously from the presentation, there seems to be, my understanding from their presentation was that there's funding streams available, but to access the funding stream, we need a community plan. And that's my understanding. Is that yours, Mayor?
Well, I think the indication is that there was funding available that would have been available for us to do this work that we didn't take advantage of a couple of years ago, and that there are some other sources. But I think the thing we have to decide is council going to direct that we will lead the development of a child care action plan, and how and where it's going to be funded from. I think is what we need to develop. And I don't know that there's any funding available today, but I think the first step is, are we going to lead the creation of a child care action plan, and how is it going to be funded?
How's the planning going to be funded?
How's the planning going to be funded?
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion that we do it in the same style of language, Mayor, that you put together for the previous motion, that we put this, our staff to develop a plan to put a proposal together for us for the 2022 budget, that whereby we achieve a community plan for the city.
Okay.
As it relates to daycare.
Thank you. Childcare.
Childcare, sorry.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur? Councillor Earl, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in looking at the presentation, following up on the suggestions of others, so the two types of funding cited in the were a one-time $25,000 grant to help specifically with the development of a community child care program, or needs assessment, I guess you call it. I would highlight that was a one-time piece of funding from the appearance. It does look like it's open annually. It does not account for any kind of ongoing administrative costs or upkeep around that. So it is something that might require some budget. And then the second piece was a grant for capital as far as new spaces go. And that is $250,000 to $500,000, and that can be utilized by nonprofits. In the application, it does not specify that a community child care plan is required, but it may be, given the federal and provincial government's new emphasis on child care, that could be a recent addition to it. So I'm not sure what that is. What I would, and this is me speaking as somebody who's has a 4-year-old now, but she's been in full-time daycare in some form or another since she was about 11 months old. While the province and federal government are marshaling more resources to put towards this, from my perspective as a parent, it is somewhat of a bureaucratic nightmare to navigate. I mean, even with the announcement of the new federal funding, that funding, based on what they said, will not be available for private childcare providers. It's just government, a municipal or nonprofit, which, depending on the outcome of a community care assessment or a needs assessment, that's a pretty, in my experience with childcare, we as a community, and no community is so lucky in their choice of childcare providers that they can just ignore the private sector in that. So I have reservations about how available that's going to be. So while there is funding available, it seems, I don't know if it's as the ability to access it is as linear and straightforward as it was depicted in those reports. But I think it's worthwhile. I know the work you're doing. I'm not sure if your intention was for that to result in a specific action plan, or it was to maybe have somebody else provide that with us as kind of a periphery support person or entity. And I'm not sure how difficult it would be to fold or accommodate the Building Learning Together Society into that process. I wouldn't be, obviously they've got some opinions on the matter, and I want to make sure they have an opportunity to be heard as they give that input.
So I'll answer 2 or 3 of your comments. First of all, the grant funding there is no grant funding available right now. I've been exploring that both through the ministry. UBCM funding was ended last year, so there is no funding available for the planning. Okay. And then the New Spaces Fund, the creation of New Spaces Fund, depending on a municipality or who's leading it, depends on the amount that you can qualify for. But right now, there is no new funding available to do this planning work, and that's the issue I've been facing. Was in the motion that we had, council gave me a month ago, was to, it's okay to lead this planning stuff, but we got to find the funding if I can, and I haven't been able to do that. And so I think honestly, the federal government, provincial government, everybody is working away at it, but obviously it's a stronger process if we're in there, if we're up part of the process because it's municipality. City of Prince George saw that. They got $3 or $4 million for a new facility downtown. So it can be done. We just got to get the planning work done. So, Councillor Wilbur, you had a comment?
It's kind of touched on, but part of that funding was also that it was going to be on in a municipal building, or it was going to be on municipal property versus there was funding for daycares, private daycares to expand. So within, yes, there was funding, cutoffs come and gone. The city has closed 2 facilities that we ran that had after-school daycare that had open seats. So I just want that out there for clarity, that funding was actually for the city itself to open daycare from UBCM.
Well, they had a $25,000 grant available to anybody who wanted to do the planning work for childcare, the creation of new childcare spaces, and that was a specific grant available to municipalities, and Chetwynd were a part of that as well. So anyway, I think this is this part of what we're going to try to do is to build a strong model of childcare for our community and region. So thank you. Any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 10.5, we have a request for support from Jeff Ginter and the application he's making for a letter of support for the on behalf of the Doss Creek Curling Club. Councillor Wilbur?
I would move that we provide the Dawson Creek Curling Club with a letter of support for their grant application.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Javetkov. Discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
What I liked about the application is that they have set aside their portion of the money. So that speaks to long-term planning, some discipline within the organization. I'm going to be voting for this, but, just want to flag a concern I have is, we are a relatively small community, and if one organization gets the ability to attract because of their improved facilities, it generally will come from some other organization. And I was immediately thinking about the private sector, where there are some facilities, right? And I'm thinking about competition with the catering side of Ovintiv, the Ovintiv Center, whatever. That's the proper name for it now. But anyway, the curling club needs the money, revenue, and if they can get the grant, great. But I do have a concern that we've got this dynamic going on, and we have other organizations in our community region applying for the same grant. And the thought I had is, if the city's going to support all these different things, should we have some prioritization? Right now, you've got letters of support for at least 3. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
I share Councillor Parslow's concerns. I know, with the advent of, or I guess, Co-op Mercer Hall coming on board, in addition to increased capacity at the curling, you do worry that you're going to be cannibalizing the market and siphoning off much needed revenue from the private sector and undermining the investments they've made in capital. So I'll support the application. I do share that concern, though. One thing I would note is Spectra, as part of their mandate, is to, both through tourism and through the event center, to seek out external third-party events that they can bring into town, and they've done a fairly good job at that. And those were largely events, whether it's the Beef Congress or the regional Rotary and whatnot. Those are not events that could have been accommodated at local venues, and it's my hope that curling, if they're successful, would go about doing that. My one question I have for staff, and I know it's maybe too early to discuss, or I don't know if it'd be better discussed and closed, but with the new agreement being negotiated, similar to, I know in the Exhibition Association's agreement, there is a piece of that which involves an annual capital commitment from us, or a capital commitment over the term of the agreement. Is that something that'll be?
Let's leave that for
Okay.
when Blair brings
Okay.
back the lease agreement. We're dealing with a letter of support here, so.
Okay.
Blair?
Your worship, I will note, amongst their ask, it's an A, B, C, and D for the letter you're referring to. So just so council's aware, they've got a number of asks in there with that. There are things such as the capital improvements to the facility that have to, we go through, or certainly our community development general manager would work with the curling club to approve those. There's just a number of things. It isn't just a letter of support for the application. If you go back to the letter, I just want to encourage council to look at that.
But, okay, so, I think your motion, Councillor Wilbur,
Okay.
and Councillor, who seconded for me there? Councillor Parslow? Javetkov? Yeah. You're okay with that? So, further comments? Jeremy, you had a further?
Yeah, no, the nature of my question to Blair was just getting to the point that we're not, by supporting this letter, inadvertently committing ourselves to capital projects 4 or 5 years down the road that we haven't had a chance to. And I know the language they used was that they'd be very proactive in collaborating with us should something. I just want to make sure we're not committing to backstop the cost of this project, or if there's other commitments required to secure this funding, that we're not going to potentially be on the hook for it.
And thank you for the question. Through you, your worship, no, we aren't tying our hands. They have made a commitment that within their budget, they have their portion of that 25%. Now, having said that, in our discussions, each of the lease agreements that we have dealt with already and the future ones coming forward have an obligation to come together and speak about the capital requirements each year to make sure that the curling club's capital asks align with the city's capital asks. As it's our building, we have a plan in place, so that would continue. I guess best case scenario is what the curling club is after and doing fits in with our capital plan as we look forward 5 years. But our hands are not tied by this request whatsoever.
Yeah, that was, sorry, I didn't mean to get into the details of the
No,
conduct and
that's
the
fine.
intent of my question.
Thank you. Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Chief Administrative Officer's report.
Your worship, today there's nothing new to add.
Thank you. Consent calendar. I have a motion to approve consent received. Councillor Parslow, second. Councillor Wilbur. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Is there anything anybody would like to lift from the consent calendar? Strategic priorities. Blair, anything?
Nothing new, your worship?
Media? Nothing. So we are now concluded our open meeting and would go to closed. We're at 12:20, 12:15. I'm going to suggest if we can just carry on and do closed. We'll take a 5 or 7 minute break to allow Carl and staff to clear out. And closed isn't a big agenda, and so if we can do that, then that will solve us having to come back at 1:30 because I have a meeting at 1 o'clock. And I predicted we'd be done by 12 o'clock.